everyone. Welcome to our first Topic Tuesday. So, the topic of this week that we're going to deep dive into is why invest. And I think personally for me, why invest is I want to secure my future and I want to make my money work for me. Like, I have had salaried jobs throughout my career, and ultimately, like, investing is the best way to make money literally while you sleep. And then, I mean, we talked briefly about inflation yesterday, but you kind of have to invest, right? If you want to retire comfortably, if you just let your money sit under your mattress or even in a low yield savings account, you're really, really doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. Like, to me, being an investor is empowering. And like, if you had asked me 5 years ago before I started working with my dad, like, oh, do you consider yourself to be an investor? I would have been like, no, like, I don't know anything about investing. But at the time, I had a retirement account. And I think the other thing about the investor mindset that I value is you learn to look at problems from an analytical standpoint. So, to kind of like cue up a real life example of how the investor mindset can be really valuable in any type of business, Dad, I think you should talk about the construction conference you recently went to and what your experience was.
Sure. So one of the investments that I have is in a construction company that does commercial aluminum windows and doors. So like the aluminum entrances at your apartment complex or at a hotel or at your favorite fast food place. Those are all the kind of things that we do. And this convention obviously was machines and services related to that industry. We were there looking at large CNC machines, and my partner was really excited about them and wanted to know what it would take for us to be able to invest in them. And so then we had to talk about the measurements we need to do in our existing business in order to be able to make an intelligent decision about buying that machine, even though I have to agree it was a cool machine. We still want
So,
to,
what were some of those metrics that you need to define?
well, we need to be able to define, for example, what we're currently spending to produce one part in a very complex window structure. And we know what it costs on a job level, and we could probably figure out, given how we're collecting data right now, on a per window frame level, but we're not currently collecting the data to figure out on a level. And so that's what we
Okay,
need to
so
put together so that we could make an intelligent decision on how to whether or not to buy that machine.
So the investor mindset in this particular example is basically, instead of buying into the hype and, the sales pitch of, oh, this is a really great machine, it's going to revolutionize your business, right? When you apply an investor mindset to a decision like that, you're looking at data driven analytics and making a decision on whether it's going to be a worthwhile investment, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because if you go off of the emotion, it's wow, that's really cool, and I'd really like to have it. But if you're looking at it as an investor, it's okay. I'm going to spend X dollars. How soon do I get those dollars back? And how much money does that make me during the life of that machine? Because it's not going to last forever.
Right. And Britt, with your background in e-commerce and consumer products, like, maybe talk about how the investor mindset gets applied in those spaces and how you think about like return on investment and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I think when people think about like consumer products, they really think more about the emotional side to things or the branding. And branding is super important, but especially in e-commerce, everything is so data driven, right? Especially like when we spend money on ads, we want to know how performant those were. And we want to see, okay, like if we spend this much money on ads, if we spent more money getting that customer to the site, that actually might be okay if we know that they're going to make a repeat purchase, right? So there's so much math involved in terms of we want to know what's the customer lifetime value, how much does it cost to bring them there, what what can we do metrics wise to invest, like for example we invest in different software platforms to make the site manage well, whether it's a referral program, what have you, because all of these things help facilitate a higher customer lifetime value and improve our bottom line for the business. So you're really going to need to do that anywhere. I think a more personal example is kind of like the idea of girl math, which has been trending lately. Just the idea of how many times am I going to use this? How many times am I going to wear XYZ? Like, so I think technically girl math is the investor mindset. I don't know how big the ROI is on some of these more frivolous clothing purchases, but I think you can apply that mindset to like anything that you're doing when you're looking at, if I'm investing in X stock, like what's going to be that return based on how much money I'm putting in, right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And that's something actually that, like, so when I started traveling a lot more, and, I'm always asking my dad, like, okay, what could I do to optimize my travel and, like make my life easier and stuff. And one of the pieces of advice that you gave me, Dad, was something along the lines of, um, like, something that people don't do is what are things I can buy that will make my life more convenient, right? And the return on investment in that case is probably going to be huge. So for example, like I had one phone charger, right? And so like every trip it'd be like, "Oh, I got to remember to grab my phone charger. Oh, I got to remember to grab, my laptop charger." And then finally my dad was like, "What are you doing? Just buy like 10 chargers and put them in every bag." And so it's like things like that where it's, oh yeah, like chargers are so cheap, but like my return on investment, that makes my life so much easier. I'm not no longer wasting time trying to remember to grab it. So I think having an investor mindset, it really helps you hone in on the things that are where your time is going to be best spent.
Yeah, I feel like my friends make fun of me, but I use the term ROI, return on investment, all the time. They're like, why don't you do this? And I'm like, that's not a high ROI for me. Like, you should be thinking about the return on investment for your time, who you're spending that time with, right? Like, if you're coming out of a conversation with someone and it puts you in a bad mood all day, probably not a high ROI person to be around, right? Like, I think that the investor mindset really is applicable to just every single facet of your life in terms of how do you maximize your ROI and get the most out of your time, energy, and money.
And it also provides a great excuse. Like,
What do you mean?
similar to what Whitney was talking about on her chargers, I buy reading glasses by the case. And the excuse is, oh, that makes my life better, and I don't have to hunt around for them. The reality is, I just forget, and I lose them constantly, and my grandkids, trash them left and right. So it's a cover.
Well, and I think that's the girl math thing, right? The cover is, well, I'm going to use this a ton. I'm going to, get my money's worth. So you're right. Sometimes you need a little excuse to treat yourself. So the investor mindset is valuable. I think learning how to think like an investor can be really valuable in many facets of our lives, right? Um, so I guess my next question for all of us is how do we use the investor mindset, um, maybe when we're looking at a new opportunity, or whether it's a potential investment or a new job. And Dad, maybe you can start. Like, what are you thinking about in terms of like your portfolio, or in your personal life when it comes to
Sure, sure.
return on investment?
Yeah. Well, looking back in my past, um, I have 8 kids, and the decision on each one of those kids was very similar to the decision process you go through in deciding to buy a durable consumer good.
Wow, I feel so honored. I've just been compared to a consumer good. Fantastic.
Well, kid, fridge, it's all kind of the same. So
Although the kid's probably going to cost you a lot more than a
that's
fridge.
true.
Touche.
The fridge doesn't go to college. You're right. So,
Okay, okay, but expand on that. So, when you were thinking about having a kid,
well,
what
no,
was
you
the
as a
decision?
parent, you got to think about, okay, the expenditures. You know, the, It's like I had an employee that I hired to run an office for us in Australia in a prior investment company that I'd helped found, and I was constantly bugging him about when he was going to marry his or his girlfriend. And finally, one time I was down and he asked me why I cared. And I just explained to him, I said, Andrew, there is no better employee than a man who has a large mortgage and a lot of private tuition payments ahead of him. Well, Andrew's now married. He has two kids. And I was talking to him on the phone not too long ago. And he asked me if I remembered that conversation. And I said, yes, I did. And he said, you are spot on. I understand that completely. So with kids, it's not, oh yeah, it's fun having a kid, and I mean it is, but it's not just that. You got to think about the cost, the expense, education, clothes, you know, and then the living hell of teaching them how to drive. So,
So, since all of your 8 children are grown now, what would you say your return on investment was?
well, and it's been entertaining seeing what everybody chose to do as careers. It's been fun watching, the coupling up and the different marriages. And then the true dividend of all dividends is the grandchildren.
That's a good point.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's actually a really good example of how like the investor mindset truly should be applied to every decision that we make, right? It's not only evaluating our emotions, which can be really important when it comes to making an investment decision. But it's also important to consider what's the big picture, what's the longer term, both expenses and potential return, and what are the dividends going to look like, and thinking about the whole picture.
Yeah, I think for me, the way I break it down, and I just realized these all start with R, so it can be the three R's, which is exciting. And now I'm nervous that it maybe already exists in the ether. We'll see. But for me, like, first you start with resources, right? So, like, what resources do you have available? Like, if you're making, 20K, your investment decisions are going to be very different than someone making 200, right? So you have to look at resources. What do you have available to you? And then two, you need to look at risk, right? So every single investment, even having kids, Greg, there was a high risk there that one of them goes off, right? So I think you have to look at risk and understand too, when you've now assessed your resources, am I able to take that risk, right? Like what level of risk? If you're someone that's in, like about to retire, needs to have a significantly lower level of risk with their portfolio than someone has their entire career to, build that up. And then the third is return, right? So based on what risk you can have, what's like the optimal return, right? Because if you find something with a lot of risk and little return, that doesn't make any sense, right? And that's what you'll typically see in the market, and we'll get a bit more into that. But I think you can look at that with anything, whether it's raising a family or investing in the stock market.
Well, and I just add to that the comment that the American humorist Will Rogers made about investing. And he said that he was not so concerned on the return on his investment, but the return of his investment. And I think a lot of people forget that when they're making investment decisions.
That is a fantastic point, Greg. I think that's a perfect closer for Topic Tuesday. Super excited to nerd out with some awesome history facts on investment for Way Back Wednesday. We'll see you tomorrow.